This is how to configure user groups as well as set up a new one if you want to. If you click on Tools and Tracker, it will take you out, and under the User Setup, you'll see User Groups. If we click on our User Group option, this will show the user group that's been built out for you in your pre-configured system. So if I look at Administrator, this is going to be the name of the user group. The description is the description that's entered in for it. The layout is going to be the layout that is being used for this, which can be customized in the Layout Designer tracker. And the user count will display how many users are placed into that group. So we'll look at our administrator user group here. Now this is where I can change the name of it. I can change that description, and then I can apply a different layout if you have built other layouts on the system. If I go down to Tools Access, this is where when I click on the Tools button in Tracker, what items do you want visible or not? So if you're building out user groups for the rest of your team, you could unselect everything, and if they were to click on Tools, they wouldn't see any options visible. Now, there may be simple ones you want them to have access to, like the document library, or if you want them to be able to have access to templates. But typically, most of these are going to be held at an administrator level. It's as easy as unticking a box, hitting Save, and that would disappear from the Tools menu for them. The next layer of the user groups is going to be privileges. This is where you can allow or disallow lots of different functions on the system, such as the ability to delete records. Do you want this group to do that or not? You can also choose things such as, do you want them to view other records, so that if they're not the owner of that, they wouldn't be able to view it. You can restrict the ability to change ownership, so they wouldn't be able to change ownership on records. And then also building custom reports is something that you can restrict. So these can just be selected or unselected to allow or disallow those particular privileges for that group. Tab access is going to take you to the next layer. This is where you can select, do they see all of the tabs on the top level of Tracker just by selecting or unselecting the main navigation. And then when they're navigating through their records, do you want them to see the blocks of information? So if you didn't want a particular set of users to see anything around timesheets or projects, you could go through and unselect timesheets, projects, and anything related to that. When you hit Save and Close, it would remove that for that particular group. Now the last option here is going to be reporting, and this is where you can choose to make the folders of reports available. So if you did choose to leave the reporting tab open, you could go down and make it so they could only see a certain folder of reports. So they could only see reports that are in their My Report section. So the other option that is going to be controlled by user groups is a row limit. So if they are building custom reports, you can put a limit which will be a default of 1,000 to make sure that you're not building reports that are too big. You can increase the limit here by changing that value. Now, upper right-hand side, this is where we can save and close the user group, which will save any changes and take us back. We can clone the user group if we're wanting to build a second one. We can delete the user group entirely, or we can return to user groups. So be very careful of deleting this because this is going to be your user group that's on there. But let's say we wanted to clone it. I can hit the clone button, hit OK. And this is where we can start to build out that second user group if we wanted. So here we could call this Recruiter. We could rename it and we could say Limited Access. And we could give them the same user group, or we could always change this down the road. Right now there's only one built, so we're going to give them the Recruiter layout. Now we're going to go into Tools Access, and this is where we could say, all right, our recruiters, we do not want them to have access to any of these options on here. So I'm just going to go through and untick the boxes to remove all access for this particular recruiter. So they will not be able to configure or see anything on the system that's going to change our layout or our views of data. Now the one thing, like I said, you may want to keep for any secondary groups like this is going to be the document library, which will give them access to documents. and maybe image library as well if they're using images for any type of templates on the system. Next, we can go into privileges, and this is where we could remove. So if we didn't want them to be able to delete records, we could do that. If we didn't want them to be able to buy any credits, if we didn't want smartphone access, no private and confidential record access, we don't want them to be able to print records, change ownership, import, export records, or build custom reports. Those are just some of the things you may want to remove, but obviously you can go through this and tailor it exactly as you want. Under tab access, we may want to go in and say we don't want to give them access to the finance tab, to projects, or reporting. And in the sub blocks, we don't want them to be able to see our forecast. We don't want them to be able to see targets, banking info, expenses, anything with timesheets, project planning, and those would remove entirely. Now under reporting, since we've removed the reporting tab, we can also say, I don't want any access to these particular reports. Now if we hit save and close, that will create your user group, and it will take and assign all the people out into that. Now you'll see there's 0 users in there. All we would have to do to assign a user into that group is go into Tools. You would go into your Users section, and here, this is where if I go into my user that's on this system, you can change their user group from the user screen by selecting here the user group that they sit in, and I could change them from admin to my recruiter user group.